Hi, and welcome to this edition of the IBM Champion Chat. I'm Libby Ingracia. I'm your host, and I'm also the program director for the IBM Champions program. Pardon me, a little frog in my throat. And today we have a really great session where we're going to hear from some of our newly minted Lifetime IBM Champions, not only about their work as champions, but their work in and across systems, power systems, IBM Z, and storage. The IBM Champions program is a program that recognizes and rewards the work of non-IBMers who are hugely enthusiastic about their work with IBM products, offerings, services, technologies. They're the ones that you always see speaking at conferences, writing blogs, running user groups, speaking at user group meetings and helping to make those highly successful, supporting you in the community, etc. And we gather them together, we say thank you, and then we help them to do even more work the year that they're a champion. So let's get started with today. And first I want to bring on my co-host, Luke Shantz. Luke, how you doing today?
I'm well, Libby. How are you?
I am good. I'm feeling a little sleepy, so I'm hoping that that we continue to have this great conversation with these champions. I'm so excited to hear from the Lifetime Champions.
I am too, because as you know from my podcast, which I'm going to plug below, I love origin stories, and I love technology, but I love the people involved with technology, and I love hearing about the culture and where they came from and how they work together. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
This is a perfect one for you because I actually love your origin stories in the podcast. They're some of my favorite ones, and that's one of the things I think we're going to get from the champions today. So why don't we bring them on and hear what they have to tell us?
Great, let's do it.
Hi, champions. How about you guys introduce yourselves? I'm so happy to see you. Jackie, do you want to start us off?
You always pick on me first.
Well, I just like you so much.
Okay, I'll take it. So I'm Jackie Lynch, and I'm originally from New Zealand, but I've been in the States for about 30 years. I've been working in IT for, I'm going to say over 40, and started out in mainframes. Around 93, I moved over to working on power systems and pretty much operating systems, performance, VIO servers. That's all been my life ever since. I had a couple of stints as a business partner, mostly as a customer, and now as a consultant. That's the short version.
Jackie currently holds the honor, perhaps, of being our only IBM champion to have been featured in two IBM Champion chats. So we're glad to have you back on the chat today, Jackie.
Thank you.
Dusty, how about you?
Hi, I'm Dusty Rivers. I'm director at GT Software, and I've actually been working on the Z system. My wife, when I told her that I'd been awarded or honored with the Lifetime Champion program, she said, well, your entire IT lifetime has been on Z. So I've been working on the Z platform for 43 years in IMS, in DB2, but primarily on the mainframe for all of my career.
It's pretty amazing when I think about how many different versions there have been of my career and how many different technologies, to know that you've been able to make this illustrious career really all on the same platform is pretty amazing.
Well, some of the stuff, and I said this once before, is a lot of the things I'm working on now were not around when I started, but the platform has just morphed and grown and evolved. But the mainframe is here. So
that's awesome. And last, but of course not least, our friend Bob. Hi, Bob.
Hi there. Yeah, so here I was thinking that I was going to talk about being involved in IT and technology for 40 years, thinking, boy, I'm probably the longest one here. And it turns out I'm not. So But yeah, so I've been at Nuance Communications since 2013, and then in my prior, I guess I'll say career lifetime, I was an IBMer. Been involved or dabbling in storage since probably 20 years ago or so. Bounced around in a few other advanced technology things prior to Spectrum Scale, and I guess prior to the, AKA GPFS, and honored to be a newly minted Lifetime Champion.
Well, we're so grateful to have you, all three of you, not just here today, but as champions for many years, and now as our Lifetime Champions. I think maybe we should make sure that the folks watching and listening know what a Lifetime Champion is. Basically, the Lifetime Champions, and then I'll let each of you tell a little bit about what it's meant to you or what you think about it. The Lifetime Champions no longer have to reapply to be an IBM champion every year like the rest of the folks in the program. And they're named Lifetime Champions because in a program where it's the top 1% of advocates and experts, these folks, the Lifetime Champions, stand even head and shoulders above the others, either with their dedication to the program, where they come back in and they're always willing to do whatever we need to support the program, coming up with good ideas for the program. Also in their own technical advocacy work and contributions, they've stood head and shoulders above consistently for many years. So, I guess nobody expects the Lifetime Champion Award, just like nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Yes, I'm movie quoting now. But how do you feel you sort of went from just being a person working with the technology to being an advocate, to being a champion, to being a Lifetime Champion? Do you see a path or a trajectory there? Bob, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I don't know. For me, it just seems like sort of a natural evolution. You get sort of engaged in a particular area or a particular technology, and a lot of times you're curious about, let's say, the way something works, or you want to learn about some new aspect of the technology, and you learn about user groups, and you learn about technical programs or internal IBM programs, and it sort of feeds upon itself, right? I mean, you get involved with one thing, and then you get involved with another, and before you know it, you're got your hands in about 10 different things, and you're doing things. You're doing a lot more in the community than you sometimes realize, right?
I think you said two things there that really resonate with me, Bob. First of all, that curiosity. I think if I had to pick two characteristics that I think all champions display, curiosity is definitely one of them. We're all just, and I'm going to count myself in this, because I think if I weren't an IBMer, I would definitely hope that I would be an IBM champion. I think that interest in, okay, well, it does this, but can it do this? Or what are other people doing with it? Or what are other people saying about it? Or, well, how does it work if I connect it to that? That curiosity. And then I think the second thing that I would say is a characteristic of all of the champions is just that desire to give back. So you kind of mentioned the user groups and the communities and how you're doing more there than you even realize. And that's because I would suspect that you're just like, oh, well, I see that question and I solved that one. Let me just, it'll just take me 5 minutes. I'll answer it real quick. And you don't even think that you're contributing necessarily or making a big deal. You're just, somebody had a question and you answered it. But that's, I think, the backbone of what we do together.
Yeah, and like I say, it's just one of those things that, I don't know, maybe it's a personality trait, but whatever I tell people, it's like if they're thinking about becoming a champion, if you just take a step back and you're doing a lot of things that you don't normally think of as those sorts of activities, but when you look at it as the sum total, they add up to quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Dusty, what do you think? What has your journey from across those 43 years looked like? From like, did you immediately start in contributing to the community? Was there
No.
a moment where you turned?
Well, I started as, I started as a DBA. I was working with databases. And, one of the things is we were doing some exciting stuff. And back in the 80s, I hate to say that, but back in the 80s when DB2 came out, we had actually in college worked on a project where my group actually wrote a relational database management system for our senior project. And so when DB2 came out, I was like, great, I want to work on that. And so when we started implementing that, somebody said, what you're doing with DB2, other people may want to know about. So I did my first presentation at Share. And then they said, well, can you present this? Can you present this? And then we started participating in listservs. And so it kind of grew from that. And then it was presenting at Share, presenting at other user groups, and actually founding a user group. And then it grew, like I said, when you mentioned my name in the same word with Lifetime, as I said, there was two very nice women, Beverly Tyrell and Ann Sheridan, who said, as much as you do in IMS, we've got this program called the Champions Program, and that was 12 years ago. And they said, you need to get involved in that. And I said, what does that mean? They said, well, we're going to ask you to do more. And so it kind of morphed from presenting at local groups to presenting at Share, because I travel globally now presenting, but it just kind of, as you said, we solved a problem. And I saw someone say, hey, how do I do this in DB2? Or how do I do this in IMS? In fact, my last presentation was, talking about APIs. You don't know what you don't know. And as I was talking, that's one of the things when I'm speaking, if I see people nodding their head, I'm like, okay, you had that too. So it just kind of grew out of experience.
I love that. I think it's, I think it's kind of telling that when you came into the Champions program that they said, we're going to ask you to do more. We do ask champions to do more. We don't, for all of you out there who might be thinking about nominating yourself or someone else to the program, we hope that it is never a to-do list or onerous, but we do give opportunities to do more contributions, to do contributions that might be more impactful or on a larger scale or on a larger stage. And I think that's kind of what you were alluding to, Dusty, right. Where you went kind of from the local to the global stage. And that's definitely something that we try to help our champions do. Jackie, what about you? Where did your sort of advocacy journey start?
Well, so my whole career has kind of been, I'm going to say, a progression of opportunities. I started in 77. I was supposed to go to university, study French, German, and philosophy. And the New Zealand government offered me a job as a computer programmer with part-time university, but I had to change and study computer science. So I said, okay. And then they started to send me off to training classes in Australia. And then I started to actually speak at things like Share and got involved with the computer measurement group over there. After I moved to the States, I got very heavily involved with computer measurement group. I was on their board. I was one of their presidents. But it was never my intention to do any of it. They were just opportunities that came up because of work I was doing. And I started speaking at ironically, the very first C-Series Expo, but the conferences, because the company that I worked for wouldn't fund me to go to training. They were a university. But at the time, IBM would fund a client speaker. So I said, I can speak on something. And then it kind of grew from there. And now I usually speak 4 or 5 times at the conferences. I got invited to write an article for one of the magazines back in 2004 and have pretty much been writing for them most months since. Again, it was sort of an accidental thing, met them at a conference. And now for me, having been in the business 43 years, you forget a lot of stuff. It's almost like I write articles as my way of documenting things so that I A, share the knowledge, and B, can find out what I did. And it's just been like a progression that's grown and grown, but it's a lot of fun. And I miss the in-person conferences because the networking and just hanging out with your friends and meeting customers. But the virtual conferences, we can still do some of that. So
I think one of the things that I miss the most is the happenstance, kind of like you were saying, where you didn't necessarily plan a progression in terms of your advocacy. It was just opportunities came up. And I think that's the piece that is harder to manufacture or create or find when we're virtual like this, is those happenstance moments. I don't say impossible, but I think we have to look a little harder for them. But I think my whole career has been one, well, look, there's an opportunity, I think I'll take it, after another. And so I think that's something that we should be telling all of the folks listening and watching out there, that, I've rarely regretted taking an opportunity, trying something new, even if it was a left turn or a risk or, what do you think?
So for me, that's been my whole life. I mean, in 1990, we moved to the States because my husband got offered the opportunity to go to MIT to do a PhD, and they were going to fund it. And he's going, I'm not going to apply. They'll never let me in. And I'm going, you got an email from the head of the department, who's also the head of the admissions committee. I think you got a chance. So we both threw in our jobs and moved over here. I think one of the things that I see in Champions is this ability to recognize an opportunity even when it's not obvious. And then the second thing, you mentioned curiosity. I tend to put it down to more stubbornness. Like, if you give me a problem, it is going to be solved. If I have to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning because I dreamed about it. And I think that's something I see in a lot of the champions, is the curiosity goes beyond just curiosity. They decide they want to figure something out. They're going to figure it out.
I love it. Stubbornness. I think that's actually pretty accurate, Jackie.
Definitely.
Looking back at my own, I was technical once upon a time. My own career started in server rooms and, battling the battle between operating systems and hardware and application stack sitting on top of that. And I think stubbornness is what kept me at it. Although clearly my stubbornness and curiosity, I don't know if it failed me or just took me in a different direction, and that's why I'm not still doing that.
I have a Libby story.
Dusty, go ahead.
You were talking about curiosity and opportunity. I remember years ago, and you may not remember, at the first World of Watson, you were pinging all of the champions to say, are you coming? And I said, well, my specialty is mainframe, and there's not a session on integrating the mainframe with Watson and APIs. And you go, there is now, you're doing one. So
that sounds about right. Sounds like it would be maybe.
Well, sometimes opportunities come up, and sometimes we have to make them come up. So, I think what I like best about working with all of you champions and working with this program is that we create those moments of happenstance among us. I've seen one of our champions just took a briefing, which is one of the benefits that we give to the champions. He took a briefing on something that's coming up from IBM and isn't even fully public yet. And he did the deep dive briefing. He asked some questions. Then he turned that into a proof of concept at his company and did some amazing testing that he's going to be able to share back to IBM and to share publicly. And then he turned that into a talk that he was able to give to the champions. And then, that will all continue to snowball into more opportunities. So we kind of have this lovely cycle, this little circular set of positives going, where we give a benefit, but you all make so much out of that benefit that it's like, who was this really a benefit for? And then it, kind of comes around next. Do you think there's any moments that you'd want to talk about that are I learned this, I applied this, it led to this. Some more of those, kind of happenstance stories that you think will resonate with some of these. I know we've got a couple of folks out there that are new. We've got someone new to mainframe in their first IT job, and just, how do they make that happenstance happen for them? How do they grab that?
Well, I think. Go ahead, Jackie.
Sorry, Dusty. I was just going to say, I would start by not expecting that you're going to be working 9 to 5, 5 days a week.
Ain't that the truth?
When I started out, I was literally working 120 hours a week. And I don't expect people to do that now. But when so much of what we have to do is outside hours, with maintenance time and everything, I think that that's something that is kind of a shock to people coming into the industry now, is we don't do things on a normal scale. I've lost track of how many times I've started work at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's when we can get the systems. So it's a bit of a culture change. And my other thing, and I know the others would agree with this, is be nosy, be curious, read those red books and the technical manuals and everything, because that's how you learn. And you learn by trying stuff. Yeah. And you will break some stuff. Someone asked me how I knew the stuff I knew, and I'm like, because I broke a lot of stuff.
We hear all about the idea of, making mistakes is how we learn. And I think there's nowhere that's more true than in technology. Now, it's nice if we can break it on the, sandbox instead of in production, which is why we have those things. But as someone who has broken things in production, I can tell you that you are really motivated to find that answer when you have broken something in production.
If you're interested in breaking things, I'm going to put a plug in for the IBM early programs, the beta software and things like that. I'm a big sort of believer in that program. If you want to take a sneak peek at, something new, or get access to things before the release so you can play around with them, and you find a lot of interesting problems, some of them that they know about and some they didn't know about. And it's a great way to sort of sandbox around with things that, and if you want to thinking about trying a particular piece of software, there's a lot of sort of trial programs too, where you can kind of kick the tires. And so that's another way to sort of expand your horizons on things you've tried and to break things, right?
Yeah, that's good advice. Go ahead, Dusty.
I was going to say, I'd also say, being a champion, I've seen a lot of the younger people come in, that come into the mainframe. What do I do? There's a lot of forums out there. I've had people call me and say, "Hey, I saw your name. Have you had this issue?" Is reach out to somebody. I mean, there's a list of all of the champions, the Lifetime Champions. All of us are there to help. I mean, I like hearing people ask questions, because that's the only way you're going to learn, especially with the platform. There's so many new things going on. And I'll call out one is one of the new champions, Byron Smith. If you want to see what you want to do as a new champion, look at Byron. His posts, his blogs, what he's doing. He's curious. He asks questions, and that's kind of how you want to jump in, especially in the mainframe. There's a lot of knowledge out there. You just can't be afraid to jump in.
Yeah, I love that. And if you all have been listening to the IBM Champions Chat or watching them previously, Byron was on a previous show as well, where we spoke about, I think he was on the security show.
Yes.
So Dusty just made a really good point about everyone perhaps wanting to connect with champions, either for, just asking a question, maybe some mentoring, maybe working together, maybe getting some great ideas. There is a list of all the champions on the website at ibm.com/champion. But if you want to really connect with them, you can also go to our community, and you'll find that if you're at ibm.com/champion, you can click on the blog link, and that'll take you to our community. You can also get there from ibm.biz. ibm.biz/champions. And what that does is it lets you see who they are in the community, their profiles, and you can actually make a connection with them, see what else they're doing at the community, talk to them, ask them questions, read what they're writing, have conversations with them in forums. So I highly recommend it. I see some questions starting to come in, and even though I've got some other questions that I want to ask you, I'm going to go ahead and just throw some of these out there. One of the questions that someone's asking is about the business areas, and Jackie and Dusty and Bob, you all have expertise or have been champions in more than one area. So I think you're kind of the perfect people to talk about this. How strict are the criteria to align to a particular area is the question. If someone doesn't have a clear specialty, is this a problem? My starting answer would be, you have to have a clear specialty, but you're welcome to have more than one, I guess is how I end up kind of looking at that. What do you all think? And how much do you feel you have, Jackie, especially you, I know you kind of started mainframe and have really moved to power. Dusty has database and mainframe. Bob was a cloud champion and storage. And so what do you all think about that?
Well, I mean, I have a clear specialty nowadays, which is power and VIO servers and performance. That's sort of the area I hang out in. But I actually do a lot of work on the IBM cloud. Yesterday I was zoning storage, which was kind of scary for me. I'm involved in a lot of different areas. It's just there's certain areas that I focus on. And so I don't, expect to become a cloud champion or anything like that anytime soon, because I have so much time that I still invest in the area that I'm primarily focused on. But I think all of us are like that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good point, because you start out in an area, and then a lot of times you'll find an area of sort of greater interest, and you'll start to focus on that area. So, I mean, if you take a look early on in your career, you might seem to be sort of broadly focused, but over time, I think you'll start to see more involvement in certain areas than other areas, right? I think anybody that's in a career, you'll find that the more you move on.
I agree.
Yeah, that's true.
Because although I've been on the Z all this time, it's been in database, it's been in transaction systems, it's been in analytics, it's been in APIs, it's been in integration. So I know I was categorized as analytics for a while, then as Systems Z, and I was both for a while. And I think it's, I know that I don't know whether it was you, Teresa, or you, Libby, said that there was, if you think you want to apply to be a champion and nominate yourself, you can put a comment in there. Hey, I work on multiple things. I don't think anyone is going to say, oh, you don't have enough check marks in Z, so we're not going to make you a Z champion. Because these days, as everything is morphing together, you can be a champion across areas.
Yep, and that's one of the things you touched on, sort of self-nomination. It's like, that's another thing that if you're thinking about becoming a champion, sometimes you think, well, nobody's bothered to nominate me, so I can't be, maybe I'm not worthy. But self-nomination is you're the person who best knows what you do, right? And so go ahead and take it. What's the worst that could happen, right? I mean, there's a lot of great people out there, and you put down what you think you're doing, and even if you don't make it this year, you stay involved, and chances are you're gonna keep elevating yourself, right?
So it's interesting you say that, because for me, the self-nomination was a struggle, because I grew up in a culture in New Zealand where you don't go out and sell yourself. And I got nominated by somebody. Otherwise, I don't know that I would have done it, because it's just not something that we tend to do. So I think that's something people need to think about, is that nominating yourself is a perfectly fine thing to do. And we all appreciate people sharing their skills with us when they become champions. So.
Yeah, and I think from the program perspective, I encourage everyone to find someone you think should be a champion and nominate them, because that gives people like Jackie and even another one of our lifetime champions who we haven't had on a call yet, Stacy. He refuses to nominate himself. He's just like, I won't do it. That's just, I can't do that. But when someone nominates him, the list could just go on and on and on of the things that he contributes and does. And so I think taking the opportunity to say thank you to someone who has, positively impacted your career, or that you've learned from in the community, or their blogs or their sessions, I think that's awesome. But in general, we're going to then follow up and ask people to nominate themselves, even if they've been nominated by someone else. We don't require it, but we feel as though you just said it, Jackie, you know more about what you've done than anyone else. Or maybe that was you, Bob, saying that, but it's absolutely true, that even if I nominated one of you all, just for example, to be champion, I would have, a couple paragraphs, but you'd be like, well, you didn't know I did this, and did you know I did that? And I'm still doing this. And, so all of those things people need to tell us themselves. And I definitely encourage you all to do that if you're out there listening. One of the things I ask the lifetime champions to do, this is the trade-off for not having to nominate yourselves anymore to be for renewal, is I ask all the lifetime champions to find some folks in the community that are, kind of coming up behind them, working in, share, common, or the Spectrum Software User Group, the places where you all are seeing activity, and kind of bring them along. Do you have some people in mind for this year that you're going to nominate? You don't have to tell me names or anything, but I want to know that you've got some people out there.
Yes.
Perfect.
I have one or two that I think that would probably be worthy of nomination. So I'll have to. Yeah, the other part of it is I hate to just cold nominate somebody, right? I mean, there's a part of me is like I should chat with them and say, I'm putting you up for champion nomination. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. In fact, the form requires it. So we should, tell folks, hey, I think you have done, some great work, and this is what this program is about. And we'd really, I would really like to nominate you. Are you okay with that? And I think that's definitely something to do. And I hope if that happens to you all out there, that you will feel super honored, because just being nominated is definitely an honor.
I think back when Ann and Beverly said, hey, you want to fill out the nomination form. And I was kind of like Jackie, well, what am I supposed to put in there? And and she said, think about, you're doing a resume for what you did this year. You're doing a resume, and that's kind of, what did you do this year? It'd be like every year, all of us have evaluations at our job, and we have to tell our boss, hey, here's what I did this year, and this is why you should give me more money. It's like, here is what I did professionally this year. It's like a professional resume you're turning in. So it's not really bragging. It's just saying, here's what I am doing.
And I was going to add to that when I got nominated, the person who nominated me had to call me and talk to me first, because they don't have, as Libby pointed out, all the details of everything that you've done. So I knew I was being nominated. I just, like I said, culturally, it's just not something that we tend to do.
So I want to take the conversation in a different direction just for a moment. We've all been affected during this year by COVID-19 and the quarantine, and that has led to a whole slew of challenges, from conferences being taken virtual and maybe scaled back, to different kinds of work that I think folks have been being asked to do, different kinds of opportunities. What would you say has been an impact that you want to talk about, either positive or negative, or just, that's had to change the way that you do either your technical job or your advocacy work?
Well, so I can talk about a little bit. For me, since I started Nuance, I've been 100% remote. So sitting in my home office doing work. So, and even before that, when I was at IBM, I was working either in an office apart from my group or in a home office. And so working apart is a little more natural than some of the other folks that may have been thrown into this in the last 6 months. And you learn, you adapt, and find other ways to communicate. But in terms of what I really miss the most is the personal interactions at the conferences and things like that. I mean, there's nothing that sort of replaced that. And I'm sure those of folks that have traveled 3 or 4 or a dozen times a year miss those personal interactions, and that's hard to substitute. But I mean, you do the best you can with sessions like this or other interactive sessions as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've worked from home since 2002. So I would travel probably once a month to different clients that I needed to do stuff on site. But I've moved data centers from my house. VPN is my friend. So I've been doing it for a long time. I think the things that I miss are the things that you just talked about, Bob, the personal relationships. It's kind of fun when you go into a client that you've had a long-term relationship with and you can get together in person and have a meal and so on. We just don't do that anymore. I live on Zoom and WebEx and all the different interfaces, but that's the thing I miss. And I think also so many opportunities have come up for me at the conferences where I've bumped into somebody in the hallway, and that's led to other things. So that doesn't happen with the virtual conferences, obviously. The flip side of that is this year I've actually been able to attend a lot more virtual conferences because they're virtual. So I was just at a high-tech crime conference for 3 days, which was very, very cool, which I would not have been able to attend normally because I would have had to travel, I would have lost all the travel time, and it would have been a lot more expensive. The virtual conferences, they're actually making less expensive, which makes them more affordable to attend. But the prep work for them is a nightmare because you have to record the sessions, and then it takes twice as long to edit them as it does to record them. So it's a learning experience for all of us.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the personal part of it is what I miss. And also, I like the two of you, I work from home, my home office most of the time when I'm not traveling. And I got a note from my airline saying, we're maintaining your status. You haven't traveled since February, and it's kind of like, I do miss that part of it. And also, like you were saying, Zoom calls. And I also found out, Libby was mentioning it early this morning. I go from WebEx to GoToMeeting to Zoom, and sometimes my laptop doesn't like the audio swapping over and it'll lock up, and so I end up rebooting like 3 or 4 times a week because my audio, my driver will say, nope, I'm not going to talk to that program.
Now, the funny thing is that we've actually gotten very much better about staying in touch with our friends. So people that I might not have called for a couple of months because I know they live by themselves, we do weekly Zooms with now. So the in-person stuff's not happening, but we're actually doing better about staying in touch with people, from a week-to-week standpoint than we used to. It's kind of strange.
I think that was especially true for me when we first started quarantining. We were being very diligent about having, happy hours or gatherings or things like that online to connect to people. And I think as time has gone on, we've maybe let it go by the wayside a little bit, but I'm starting to see a few of them come back, and it definitely helps me. I've always had so many colleagues who've become friends all around the world, from the Champions program and from, prior existences of mine. And so I rely on this, this virtual to see those folks in the far-flung corners. Do you think there are, would you like to tell us about some of these events that, perhaps in the past have been in person, but this year they're virtual, where you are about to present or speak or helping to organize, and sort of share those with the folks so that maybe they can connect with you there?
Well, we have the virtual Tech U that's coming up on October 26th. And I'm not quite sure how many sessions, but they're basically offering 3 kinds of sessions. Some of them will be live, some of them will be simulive, which is what mine is, and then there'll be others that are just on demand. So the simulive sessions are the ones where we pre-record everything, but we log in while the session is being presented at a specific time, and we answer questions through the chat.
I'm excited to see how those go. We've got one on the IBM Champions program for the TechU attendees as well. So I'm excited for that. We're going to do a little panel discussion like this one.
Yeah, and I think underneath that they're using the StreamYard stuff, which is similar to what we're doing here. But it's going to be an interesting experience. I've not done a simulive before, and I've got 5 of them. So I figure by the 5th, I'll have it down pat.
There you go.
I don't know, Dusty and Bob, are you speaking at the virtual tech use?
I'm in a panel discussion.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the first day. So that's the only one that I'm doing so far at that one. I mean, there's other things that are coming up that in the storage area, especially, have been Peter and company have been keeping us pretty busy with tech talks about every couple of weeks, and supercomputing has got actually a pretty robust program going on, and we'll be doing a bunch of user group sessions there as well.
And so supercomputing is also going completely virtual.
Yes.
It'll be so interesting to see. I went to supercomputing for the first time in person last fall, and it was immense. I mean, you think you know the scale of things, and then you go to a different conference or a different event, and suddenly you're like, oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. And so I'll be really interested to see how they translate that.
Yeah.
Also at Share, I did a presentation, I think it was on the 1st of October at the virtual Share. And that was actually the last time I traveled. Is I came home from the Share in Fort Worth to lockdown. So that was the last time I traveled, but it was actually a success. I got some of the numbers yesterday. We had over 2,000 people attend virtual Share. And just as a commercial, if you registered for Share, one of the nice things is all of the sessions were recorded, but they will be available on the Share site till the end of the year. So if you went and there was a session that you said, oh, I missed that one, you can go till the end of 2020, they'll be up live on the Share site. And then there was a little confusion. I told Libby there was an announcement that the in-person Share that was going to be held in Anaheim, they're not going to hold it in Anaheim. There's a lot of reasons they're not going to do that, but there is going to be a virtual session. It's probably going to be, it could be part virtual, part in place. They're getting details, but there will be something around the same week that the in-person Share was scheduled. So stay tuned for that, but there will be something going on then.
I think it's interesting that, Jackie pointed out one positive thing about the virtual events. I think there are a couple. Obviously the one positive that so many more people can attend so many more events because we don't have to do the travel for it. And then another one that we've discovered new ways of doing some of these sessions where we, flip things on their head, for example, and you watch the presentation on your own recorded, but then you really get to interact with the speakers, in terms of questions and discussion. It's good to know that there's always a positive side to the challenges. Let's do one more question about the program. And, the IBM Champions program has been around for about 12 or 13 years now. And we, try to evolve and grow each year. And some of that evolution has to do with who comes into the program. So, as you are thinking about, you all said, that you have some people in mind that you might nominate, but as you're just thinking about the types of people you'd like to nominate and see be in the program, maybe come from other places, some characteristics you'd like to see, or some things you'd like to see characteristics of the program as a whole, where do you think we should go in the next year? I only ask the interesting questions.
Well, let's see. So I guess I'll start it with sort of, characteristics, right? I think it's going to sort of go back to my original thoughts about people that are sort of naturally curious about expanding their work, looking for ways to grow themselves personally as well as professionally, right? Because part of the program is personal growth as well as professional growth. I mean, you always can help out others, but you want to be able to grow as a person, grow your speaking skills, grow your the interaction skills with people, maybe even become more of a teacher rather than a receiver of teaching, those kind of things. And so I think those are the opportunities that I would tend to look for.
And I think Bob makes a good point there, because all of us are champions in our area because we've worked at it hard and we've learned a lot of stuff. But the areas that are not necessarily natural to us are things like presenting and teaching and so on. And so that might be something that would be very useful, is to, like to do some kind of skills course
Right.
on that. I mean, I remember Glenn Anderson from the Z program, friends for years, and he was telling me that to improve his speaking skills, he actually joined an improv and started doing improv comedy, which was not initially natural to him, but that's how he got his speaking to where it is.
Yeah.
So I think for all of us, none of us would mind if you added something like that, because it can't hurt.
The first time you get up in front of a room with 1,000 people, and want to present, that's always sort of off-putting. No matter where you are, you start out and doing it virtually is one, but getting up in front of 500 people or 1,000 people or even more, and they're looking at you to give an expert talk. I mean, that's
but
that's
you know
a tough
what?
thing.
When you've been doing it for a long time, you learn that you'll survive.
Yeah,
My
exactly.
first time speaking was in front of 400 people, and it was an hour after my grandfather died.
Oh,
My
gosh.
second time was in Australia, and it was a hot day, and we had acetates, and they all melted together.
Oof.
My third time was in Australia again, and the speaker before me hyperventilated, passed out, hit the floor, and they had to call the paramedics. After that, I figured it had to be easy. And now there's like hundreds of them that I've done. But, we've all got stories like that where things have gone wrong. And I think that's part of the skill set you end up bringing to the table over time. I go in now and I expect to be able to present everything with absolutely no technology if everything breaks. I just prefer not to have paramedics in the room.
Or at least only paramedics who are also technologists and learning from you, not helping somebody who's hurt.
Yeah, and I think events like this also, and I know we have had, Teresa, I can speak for Teresa, is like at Share, we'll have a session that say, hey, come talk to the champions. And people show up and say, well, I'm a specialist in this area. And we also have, I'm not sure about the other in-person shows, but we actually had a different colored ribbon on our badge that said, and the deal was find the red ribbon, talk to the red ribbon people. And it was amazing the number of people who would come up and say, well, tell me what that means, or what exactly does that mean? So I think, doing events like this, answering questions, and also someone asked me about this event, said, oh, that's just locked to IBM. And I'm like, no, it's not.
Everybody. It's interesting, I heard a little bit what sounded like, and one of our folks commented on this earlier in our conversation. There's this idea, this imposter syndrome, and I think we've addressed it a couple of times when we've talked about, being brave enough or gutsy enough or whatever it is to nominate yourself. But it's also in all of those acts of advocacy, all of those contributions to community that we make. Every time we do something like that, I think those of us who suffer from imposter syndrome have to kind of overcome that a little bit. And I think it's an interesting thing to talk about in this context. What do you think?
So it's a very cultural thing in the UK and in New Zealand, and it's usually accompanied by something we call tall poppy syndrome, which is if you hold yourself up too high, people like to take you down. And so we tend to be very cautious about raising our heads. And we're also brought up to believe that we're all equal, that nobody's really better than anybody else. So that's kind of where it's not so much imposter syndrome. It's more that, why would I nominate myself for a champion? There's all these other great people. You know, like one of the ones I looked up to for a long time in power was Rob McNally. But there's all these great people. Why would I think I'm their equal? Even though when you go back and you look at the skill sets and everything, maybe you are. So I think that's part of the problem. And that's very, very challenging to get past when culturally you've been brought up to believe that.
That makes sense to me. I think perhaps looking at if you're in that cultural place, or if you're suffering from the imposter syndrome or any of the things that make you think, gosh, am I good enough, or should I hold myself up to this? I think if I could say anything to that from the program perspective, I would say, if you look at what you're doing in terms of community or sessions or whatever as service to the community, and the Champions program is offering you more opportunity to serve the community, that even though it is an honor, think about it as sort of a service leadership position, and maybe that'll help some of the folks kind of overcome that barrier to entry.
Yeah, and I would say talk to some of the champions. You know, obviously some of us had to get over it, and we managed. So, and I think that they'd be very willing to work with you and help you with a nomination or whatever. And I think people too underestimate how much value they can bring. We all learn from each other. You know, that one of the best parts for me about being a champion is being able to talk to the other champions and figure out things that I didn't know, because I bounced a conversation off somebody and they said something that triggered something else. That's incredibly valuable. And every one of us brings things to the table. I can learn things from Dusty and Bob that I might not be able to get from someone else, because I wouldn't necessarily be interacting with the Z people. I do interact with storage people a lot, actually, but there's opportunities provided that I think we all appreciate.
You know, we're about 5 or 6 minutes from the top of the hour when we're going to close. And I want to kind of just do a sort of a last round robin question. And then, you know, feel free to add anything else that you think maybe our listeners would be interested to hear. What for you is, and Jackie, you may have just answered this, but what do you think the very best thing for you about being an IBM champion or being in the IBM Champions program is, that you would say, this is why I find it so valuable, you know, you want to join us?
Yeah, I think I just answered that. It's the people, it's the context, the relationships. And I mean, obviously there's a benefits where we get early access to information and so on. But for me, it's about the relationships. This is a relationship business.
Yeah.
And you learn so much from others.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Is just seeing the people that are in the champion program and being able to talk to them. And you kind of know, okay, if I have a question, I can answer them. And you, as Jackie said, I said something at a conference, one of these online conferences, that someone halfway across the world from me in Australia said, wow, you can do that. And actually the company I work for and the company he works for are now partners, because it was one of those happenstance things that happened, but it's the people and the relationships. And sometimes someone will say something on a call and you'll say, I need to talk to that person. And so I agree with Jackie 100%. I think it's the people and the relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, Bob?
Boy, you don't want to sound like a broken record, right? You know, I keep saying about the people, but so I should probably say, well, the best part of being a champion program is getting to hang around Libby, right? You should say
Aww.
that too.
You're
That was a
already a
given.
lifetime champion, Bob. You don't have to.
The thing that always sort of strikes me is there's, and I don't know if I can articulate, there's these unintended benefits, that of just little opportunities that pop up that you wouldn't normally get access to, or you get tapped on the shoulder to ask your opinion on, that I think this becomes a part of, when you're a part of a program that's recognizing your value to the community, that others will sort of reach out to you that you wouldn't have expected, right? And maybe in ways you wouldn't have expected. So that, to me, that's a benefit.
Well, I'll tell you that I say to everyone at IBM that I have the best job in IBM because I work with the IBM Champions. So the feeling is utterly mutual, that I believe that the people are the best part of the program and the job. So we're about to close. We got about just a few more minutes, and I want to let all the listeners know that the nominations are open for the 2021 IBM Champions program. As we've talked about in the call, you can nominate yourself, or you can, and the link that's up here right now for Champ Nom is to nominate someone else. And I encourage everyone, in fact, I challenge everyone to think of someone from whom you have learned, someone who has gone out of their way to answer your question, or share some code, or share a solution or an answer in the community, or written a blog post that really resonated with you. And you can say thank you by nominating them to be an IBM champion. IBMers can also nominate customers, partners, consultants, academics with whom they work. And as the champions that you've spoken to here today have encouraged, you should come to the community, read about what the various champions are doing. You should see who they are, meet them, converse with them. We've actually got a spot in our community where questions that you might not have had answered during our call, during our live stream today, you can go to the community and follow up. These champions and other champions can converse with you there, and we can put you in touch with folks, so that even if you aren't a champion yet, you can learn some of those skills like Jackie was talking about, learn to be a better blogger, speaker, writer, everything else. Well, champions, audience, Luke, I just thank you so much. I've enjoyed the heck out of this conversation. Anything that y'all want to add before we close? That's right.
And you get cool clothes.
That's right. Dusty's on my good list because he's wearing the IBM Champion shirt today. We do have some very concrete benefits to being an IBM champion, where we share some, we call it swag, shirts and hats and mugs and suitcases and various other things that the champions use and wear, mostly to start conversations about the champion program, as well as a thank you from IBM to our amazing champions. All right, folks. Well, if there's no more questions coming in, and we're at the top of the hour here, I will just say thank you. And I hope y'all will all nominate someone, nominate yourselves, be part of the community. And thanks, champions. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you, Libby.
Thank you.